"You want the truth?" the woman on stage said, her voice slicing through the hall. "Let her sing alone. No choir, no safety net. Let's see what she's really worth." Laughter rippled outward, soft at first, then bold, as a teenage girl was nudged into the brightest circle of light. The famous singer tilted her head, amused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to sting. "If she cracks," she added, "we'll call it a learning experience." From the shadows beyond the curtains, the single father didn't flinch. He didn't rush. He reached for a small dial on the soundboard and adjusted it by a fraction, eyes steady, breath slow. Because the room was about to learn something none of them were ready for. This story isn't about talent being discovered. It's about power using humiliation as entertainment. Before I show you the exact moment when a mocked voice did what legends couldn't, you need to see how the trap was set. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. The man in the dark wore black work boots and a faded staff badge, the kind nobody bothered to read. He stood where power never looked, surrounded by cables and quiet hums, while his mind tracked every breath on that stage. He'd learned long ago that calm, unsettled cruelty more than protest ever could. The girl's hands trembled. Somewhere in the audience, phones lifted, ready to catch a failure. Backstage, the father thought of packed lunches, late bills, and a daughter who believed music was truth before it was business. That was when the first note rose. It didn't shatter, it didn't shake, it held. And something in the hall shifted, subtle as a change in pressure. The applause hadn't started yet. It wouldn't for a while. But the single father knew. He straightened slightly, fingers resting on worn controls, as if greeting an old friend. When the girl finished, silence pressed harder than laughter ever had. The famous singer's smile thinned. That silence carried forward, stretching into the next breath, the next second, until the woman on stage laughed again. Sharper this time, and waved it off as a fluke. The audience followed her lead, uncertain but obedient, clapping because they were told this moment didn't matter. Backstage, Malik Turner finally lifted his gaze fully toward the stage lights, his face unreadable. He had worked this hall for 3 years, loading rigs at dawn and breaking them down long after encores faded. To most people, he was another quiet technician, a widower with calloused hands and a schedule built around school pickups. To himself, he was a father first, everything else carefully folded away. The world he'd left behind still lived in his muscle memory, in how his ear cataloged tone without effort, how his body reacted to imbalance before alarms ever sounded. Tonight wasn't supposed to touch him. He'd promised himself that. He came in, did the work, went home. But watching a grown woman with power turn humiliation into sport scraped against something he'd buried for years. Malik had seen this before, dressed in different clothes, called by different names, talent isolated, pressure disguised as opportunity. On stage, the singer, Jackson Vale, as her banners reminded everyone, paced slowly, offering commentary that felt generous only if you'd never been on the receiving end. She spoke about standards, about resilience, about how the industry was hard for a reason. Each word widened the gap between where she stood and where the girl waited, still alone. In the wings, staff exchanged looks but said nothing. Money had a way of muting concern. Malik noticed a junior sound assistant fidgeting nearby, whispering that something about the acoustics felt off. Malik didn't answer. He nudged a monitor level down, then another, movements so precise they looked accidental. The girl was asked to sing again, alone again. The second attempt wasn't framed as mockery this time, but as proof. If she failed now, the narrative would seal shut. Malik felt his jaw tighten. He thought of his daughter's backpack by the door at home, patched at the seams, and the way she practiced humming scales while doing homework. When the note came again, higher this time, something strained in the system. Not the girl, the room. Feedback threatened. A lesser technician would have panicked. Malik didn't. His hand moved, smooth, correcting a problem no one else had realized was coming. The sound held. In the audience, murmurs started. Jaxine's confidence flickered, just a beat too slow to hide. She tried to replicate the run, half laughing as she did, and missed it. Not badly, just enough. Enough for people to notice. Malik exhaled through his nose, a habit from another life, and stepped back into stillness. He wasn't here to be seen, not yet, but as the girl lowered her chin, eyes wide, the father knew the night had already crossed a line it couldn't uncross, and it was only the beginning. Part 2. The silence Malik had sensed didn't break when the applause finally came. It cracked. It carried an unease that followed people into the aisles, into the private boxes, into the hushed conversations that bloomed as soon as the lights shifted. He stayed where he was, half-shadowed behind the sound rack, listening not just to noise but to intent. That habit never left you once you learned it. On stage, Jaxine Vale recovered fast. She always did. Fame taught reflexes sharper than humility. She praised the girl with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, framing the moment as generosity rather than survival. A gift she had allowed, not something that had challenged her. The audience relaxed, grateful to be told how to feel. Backstage, the girl was ushered off quickly, surrounded by assistants speaking too fast, touching her shoulders like ownership. Malik noticed how she nodded at everything, even praise, the way kids did when they weren't sure which response would keep them safest. He hated that look. It was older than this room. He powered down one channel and logged the performance automatically, fingers moving on muscle memory. Most technicians barely archived these sessions. He never skipped it. Sound told the truth later, when voices tried to rewrite it. "Did you hear that?" The junior assistant whispered again, closer now, eyes bright and unsettled. That resonance, it didn't make sense. Malik shrugged, careful. Rooms surprise you sometimes. The kid frowned, not convinced. He'd recognize that expression anywhere. Curiosity tugging at obedience. Malik turned slightly, giving the boy space to breathe. He didn't need allies yet. He needed witnesses who could think. Across the hall, Jaxine descended from the stage, already laughing with executives, already spinning the narrative. Malik caught fragments, branding, virality, how the moment could be packaged. No one said the girl's name, not once. When the singer passed the control area, her gaze slid over Malik like glass. She paused only to tap the console with a manicured finger. "Make sure next time doesn't sound so thin," she said lightly, as if offering advice. He met her eyes then, just briefly. Sound was clean. Something flashed there, surprise maybe, or irritation at being contradicted by someone in work boots. She smiled again, sharper. "We'll see." She moved on. Malik waited until her heels faded before releasing the breath he'd been holding. Around him, the hall resumed its rhythm. Crew resetting, staff laughing too loudly, security easing. To everyone else, the night was already settling into memory. For him, it was sharpening. He packed up methodically, each cable coiled the same way, each dial returned to neutral. That order wasn't about neatness. It was about control in a world that liked to pretend chaos was artistry. When his shift ended, he didn't leave immediately. He lingered long enough to watch the girl slip out a side door with a borrowed jacket, head down. Outside, rain misted the pavement. Malik pulled his own hood up and followed at a distance, not close enough to alarm her. He only needed to know she got to the bus stop safely. He did that sometimes, quiet protections nobody asked for. His phone buzzed. A photo from home. His daughter at the kitchen table. Math book open, smiling crookedly at the camera. He smiled back at the screen. This was why he stayed invisible. Stability mattered more than recognition. By the time he reached the bus stop, the girl was already gone. Good. He turned back toward the hall, intending to grab his bag when voices floated through the open loading door. "She made Jackson miss a note," someone said, half awed. "No one makes her miss." "Well, someone did." Malik paused just inside the doorway. He didn't step closer, let rumors walk without him. They traveled faster that way. Inside, Jackson's voice rose briefly, sharp with annoyance. "Find out what he adjusted. I don't want surprises tomorrow." He smiled faintly, then wiped it away. Tomorrow. That was the problem. There would always be a tomorrow where power tried to correct embarrassment. At home later, long after midnight, Malik sat at the small kitchen table, tools spread beside a cold mug of coffee. He replayed the recording once, then again, eyes closed, listening past the notes to the spaces between them. The girl's control wasn't luck. It was instinct, rare, dangerous to people who needed to feel singular. His daughter padded in, sleepy-eyed, leaning against his shoulder. "You're working again," she murmured. "Just listening," he said. She hummed softly, off-key on purpose, and smiled when he corrected nothing. He kissed the top of her head, feeling the weight of choice settle heavier. Back at the hall, the story was already changing, but the sound file remained the same. By the way, if you're still with me, subscribe and stick around, because what's being built here isn't obvious yet, but it's coming. Malik shut the laptop and stood, knowing the night hadn't ended at the concert hall. It had only shifted locations. Part 3. It had only shifted locations, Malik thought, locking the apartment door quietly so it wouldn't click too loud. Morning crept in pale and thin through the blinds, catching dust in the air like suspended breath. He packed lunches, tied a shoelace, listened to his daughter chatter about a science quiz, all while the echo of that held note lingered behind his ribs. At the concert hall, the mood had changed before he even reached the loading bay. People spoke softer, moved faster. The building remembered last night even if it pretended not to. Malik swiped his badge and stepped inside, boots crossing from rain-slick concrete to polished floors that never quite felt real. Jackson Vale arrived an hour later in a tide of assistants and tailored coats, her laughter ringing ahead of her like warning bells. She was already irritated. Embarrassment had a smell to it, sharp and metallic, and Malik caught it the moment she passed the sound booth without looking at him. "Today we reset," she announced to no one in particular. Yesterday was indulgent. We're not doing indulgent. Rehearsals began immediately. Singers rotated through warm-ups, each watched too closely, corrected too fast. The girl from last night wasn't there. Malik noticed the absence the way you noticed a missing stare, after you'd already adjusted your step. From the booth, he monitored levels, making only the necessary changes. Every instinct told him to do more, to protect the room from being bent into a weapon again, but restraint mattered. Power noticed overcorrection. Precision stayed invisible. Mid-morning, a cluster of executives gathered behind Jackson, murmuring about optics and control. Malik heard his name drift once, unimportant but present. "The tech," someone said. "Check the tech." An assistant approached the booth, polite but firm. Ms. Vale wants a full rundown of last night's settings. Logs are archived, Malik said evenly. Standard. The assistant hesitated. She wants to hear it from you. He followed without argument, stepping from cables into carpet so thick it swallowed sound. The contrast always amused him. In the rehearsal room, Jackson stood alone at center stage, arms crossed, voice already warmed. She looked smaller without an audience. You changed something, she said, skipping pleasantries. I kept the room stable. She smiled, slow and cold. Rooms don't embarrass people, people do. Malik met her gaze. Rooms reveal what's already there. For a heartbeat, silence. Then she laughed, sharp. You're very confident for someone who plugs in wires. I do my job. Her eyes narrowed, cataloging him the way she cataloged talent. Useful or disposable. I don't like surprises, she said, especially from the help. There it was, the line that drew borders and called them natural. Malik felt the familiar pull to step back, to disappear. He didn't. He inclined his head slightly. Respect without surrender. Won't happen again, he said, meaning something else entirely. She dismissed him with a wave, already bored. As he turned away, he caught his reflection in the black gloss of a piano lid, older than he felt, steadier than he looked. The man he used to be watched back, silent. In the corridors, whispers followed, some curious, some resentful. The junior assistant from last night hovered nearby, eyes bright. They're saying you saved her, the kid murmured. I didn't, Malik replied. She did. But Jackson isn't used to sharing air. The assistant grinned, then sobered. They cut the girl. Malik stopped. Cut? From callbacks, said it was disruptive. Something tightened in his chest. Disruptive. Another word that pretended fairness. He nodded once and kept walking, because standing still would have shown too much. During lunch break, he sat alone near the loading dock, rain tapping metal overhead. He thought of the girl's hand shaking, of how quickly promise became threat. He thought of his daughter's humming, fearless because no one had taught her to be afraid yet. Back inside, Jackson rehearsed harder, pushing her voice, trying to reclaim ground. She missed again, just slightly enough. Malik adjusted nothing. The room knew the difference now. And so did she. By the end of the day, tension hung low and heavy. Power hated mirrors it couldn't shatter. As Malik powered down for the night, he understood something with quiet certainty. This wasn't about one note. It was about who decided when silence was allowed. Part 4. Silence was allowed only where power permitted it, and tonight it followed him into the side rehearsal room like a held breath. He stepped inside to reset a secondary console, the older one kept for overflow sessions and forgotten by anyone who didn't need it. Dust clung to the faders. The room smelled faintly of wood and warm cables, a place meant for practice, not performance. He knelt and powered it up. The console responded the way old things did when they'd been cared for, slow, faithful. His fingers hovered, remembering. This board had been installed years before the renovation, before branding and sponsorships, back when sound mattered more than image. A soft scuff at the door made him glance up. The girl stood there, jacket too big, eyes cautious. She didn't step in. They said to wait, she said. For what? She shrugged. Someone to tell me I'm done. He gestured to the chair. Sit if you want. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold like it might vanish beneath her feet. He returned to the console, careful not to crowd her. The symbolic weight of the thing pressed into him. This board had taught him patience once, taught him how rooms breathed. They cut me, she said finally, voice small. He nodded. I heard. They said I made it hard. Hard for who? She didn't answer. He slid one fader up, then back down, checking noise. Sing if you want, he said casual, or don't. She stared at the floor. I don't sing alone. He kept his eyes on the meters. You won't be. Confusion flickered. There's no one else. There's the room, he said, and me. She swallowed. Then she sang. Not the big note, not the one people waited to judge. Something quieter, something unfinished. The console caught it gently, rounding edges, holding space. He adjusted a single dial, no more. Her shoulders loosened. That feels different, she said. Because it is, he replied. This board doesn't lie to you. She tried again, bolder now. The sound settled into the wood, into the air, into something that felt like permission. He remembered teaching this, how technology could either expose or protect depending on the hands that guided it. A presence filled the doorway. Jackson stood there, arms folded, watching like a hawk. The girl froze mid-note. What's this? Jackson asked lightly. Resetting, he said, for a cut singer? She was waiting. Jackson's gaze moved to the console, the old board. Disdain crept in. We don't use that relic. It works. That's not the point. The girl shrank back. He felt it like a pull on a wire. She has a gift, he said evenly. It deserves a fair room. Jackson smiled, thin. Gifts don't decide terms, I do. She stepped inside, heels sharp against the floor. You think you know better because you tweaked a dial? I know sound, he said, and I know success. She leaned closer. Stay in your lane. For a moment, the room held them. Old console humming, girl breathing shallow, power pressing in. He reached out and rested his hand on the worn edge of the board. The symbol mattered. It grounded him. Then let the lane be clean, he said. No games. Jackson laughed once. Tomorrow, she said to the girl, you'll audition again, alone, properly. If you can't handle it, we'll call it clarity. She turned and left, certainty trailing behind her. The girl's eyes shone. I can't do that again. He met her gaze. You can, he said, and you won't be alone. She searched his face. Why are you helping me? He thought of a kitchen table, a patched backpack, a hum in the hallway. Because talent shouldn't apologize. She nodded, trusting him with something fragile. When she left, the room felt emptier but steadier. He stayed behind, saving the settings, naming the file carefully. Outside, rain began again, tapping a rhythm he matched without thinking. The symbolic board glowed softly, ready. Tomorrow, power would try to reclaim the air. He intended to make sure the room told the truth. Part 5. The next evening pressed in tight and electric, the kind of night that made sound travel faster. Malik stood behind the old console, fingers resting lightly, while the hall filled with executives, donors, and cameras. Jackson had insisted on openness, framing it as transparency, but he knew it was control. Power loved witnesses when it expected to win. The girl waited in the wing, shoulders squared, breathing measured the way he'd shown her. No pep talk, no promises, just space. Malik felt the familiar tension coil in his spine. Not fear, but readiness. He checked the file once more, confirming every setting, every margin. The room was clean. Honest. Jackson took the stage first, commanding attention with practiced ease. She spoke about standards, about pressure revealing truth, about how real talent endured isolation. Each word landed like a dare aimed squarely at the girl. Applause followed on cue. Your turn, Jackson said, stepping aside. The lights shifted. The hall seemed to lean forward. Malik didn't look at the audience. He watched the meters, watched breath become sound. The first note rose, steady, grounded. The room held it. A second followed, then a climb that should have strained but didn't. The girl's voice moved through registers with a precision that made technicians glance at one another. Whispers started. Phones lifted. Jaxine's smile tightened. She stepped back toward the mic, laughing lightly. "Beautiful," she said. "Now let's hear something harder." The girl hesitated. Malik adjusted nothing. He met her eyes briefly from the booth and nodded once. She went higher. The hall reacted before the crowd did, resonance blooming in places never designed for it. Glass hummed. Air shifted. The sound was undeniable, raw, and controlled all at once. Jaxine stepped forward sharply. "That's enough." Too late. Applause broke through, scattered but real. The singer waved it down, irritation bleeding through polish. "It's impressive," she said, "but replicability matters." She turned, lifting her own mic. "Watch." She tried. The run slipped, not catastrophically, just enough. She tried again, forcing it, pushing past her own limits. The sound fractured, feedback snapping at the edges. A murmur rippled through the seats. Malik's hand hovered, and then moved, not to save her, but to keep the room from lying. He contained the feedback, letting the miss stand exactly as it was. Silence followed, heavier than applause. Jaxine laughed again, too loud. "Different voices," she said. "Different tools." "Same room," someone called from the front rows. Heads turned. Executives exchanged looks. Cameras zoomed. Malik felt the shift lock in, that irreversible click when narrative slipped its leash. He saved the moment automatically, tagging the file with time and date. Jaxine rounded on the booth, eyes flashing. "What did you do?" "Nothing," he said calmly. "I let it sound." The girl stood frozen, unsure whether to smile or disappear. Malik keyed the talkback, voice steady. "You did exactly what you needed to." The crowd heard it. Not as instruction, as truth. Security stirred. Jaxine raised a hand, forcing control back by will alone. "We'll take a break," she announced. As people stood buzzing, Malik exhaled slowly. This was the point of no return. He powered down non-essential channels, preserving the recording like evidence. If you're feeling this tension right now, hit subscribe and stay with me, because this is where power starts to panic. Backstage, Jaxine confronted him, voice low and sharp. "You set me up. I set the room fair. You embarrassed me. You challenged her." For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed her face, quickly buried. "You think this ends well for you?" He thought of his daughter's smile, of the girl's steadier shoulders. It already did. The doors reopened. Murmurs followed them back inside, no longer obedient. Malik returned to his place, invisible no more. The victory wasn't complete, but it was audible, etched into sound waves no money could erase. And the room remembered. Part 6. Back in the hall, the break felt longer than scheduled, stretched by rumor and rewound clips. Malik stayed at the booth, hands folded, listening to conversations bounce like loose screws. People were no longer asking if the girl was good. They were asking how. Jaxine paced the green room, voice rising behind the walls. Assistants murmured about damage control, about narrative. She wanted the moment reframed before it hardened. Power survived by moving faster than truth. A production manager approached the booth, face tight. "She wants another run," he said. "Private." Malik shook his head. "Room's set. It won't change." The manager hesitated, then left. Malik saved a second backup and locked the console. He'd learned redundancy the hard way. When the doors reopened, the audience returned restless. Jackson stepped out alone, jaw set. "We continue," she announced. "One more test." The girl walked on, chin lifted, eyes finding Malik for half a second. He gave the smallest nod. Trust held. Jackson chose a piece meant to expose weakness, announcing it with a flourish. "Let's see control," she said. The opening bars came and the girl followed, precise, grounded. Malik watched the meters ride smoothly. No tricks, no cover, just truth. Halfway through, Jackson moved closer, singing over her, asserting dominance. The blend clashed. The room resisted. Malik felt it before it sounded and corrected a micro-delay, protecting the girl's line without touching volume. The audience noticed. The clash made the difference obvious. Jackson pushed harder. Her voice thinned. She stopped abruptly, laughing. "Enough games." "It's not a game," someone said near the aisle. Jackson's eyes swept the seats. "This is my stage." "Stages belong to sound," Malik said, not raised, but carried. A hush fell. Cameras swung. Jackson stared toward the booth, disbelief flashing into anger. "You don't speak?" she snapped. "I just did." Executives shifted. The production manager swallowed. Jackson smiled again, brittle. "Fine," she said. "Explain it. Explain how she did what I couldn't." Malik didn't rush. "She listened," he said, and the room listened back. "That's nothing. It's everything." A murmur grew. Jackson's mask slipped. "Cut the feed," she ordered. Malik met the manager's eyes. "Contract says recording stand." The manager looked to the executives. No one answered. Silence chose. Jackson exhaled sharply. "You think you're righteous?" "I think she deserves honesty." Security edged closer. The girl stood still, breathing steady, refusing to fold. Malik felt pride, quiet and fierce. Jackson turned to the crowd, reclaiming her voice. "You see," she said. "Manufactured drama. Anyone can tweak sound." Malik lifted the talkback again. "Then sing it, clean, same room." A beat. Jackson laughed, then tried. The note faltered. Feedback bit. Malik contained it, letting the miss remain. Gasps. Phones rose. Truth hardened. Jackson stopped, chest heaving. For the first time, she looked small. Anger gave way to calculation. "End it," she said. Applause broke out, uncontrolled. The girl lowered her mic, eyes shining. Malik powered down the talkback and saved the final file. Beyond the booth, conversations splintered into factions. Some clung to loyalty, others to curiosity. An executive checked a phone, jaw tight, already calculating fallout. A donor whispered about integrity, surprised to hear the word in his own mouth. Malik stayed still, letting the storm move around him. He thought of the first hall he'd learned in, smaller, kinder, where mentors spoke softly and expected precision. He'd left that life when grief demanded presence over prestige, trading applause for bedtime stories. The trade had been worth it every night. Jackson tried to regroup, issuing instructions that landed flat. The crew followed procedure, not passion. Authority worked until it didn't, and then it sounded thin. The girl waited where he'd asked her to, hands steady now, spine tall, learning what it felt like to hold ground without permission. A camera operator approached the booth, hesitant. "Is the recording clean?" "It's clean," Malik said. "It always was." The operator nodded, relief evident, and moved on. From the stage, Jackson scanned the room again, measuring who might still bend. Fewer eyes dropped this time. She noticed. Her shoulders squared, pride bracing against inevitability. Malik saved one more copy to an external drive, labeling it plainly. Truth didn't need decoration. He slipped it into his pocket, weight reassuring, a symbolic anchor. When applause finally settled, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like correction. He allowed himself one breath of it, then none. Tomorrow would bring consequences, meetings, threats dressed as options. He accepted that. For now, the sound had spoken, and the room had agreed. He stayed present, unbowed, ready to finish what truth had started tonight together publicly. Backstage erupted. Jackson stormed past him. "You're done," she hissed. He replied evenly, "Maybe." The night tipped. Power hadn't fallen, but it had cracked, and everyone could hear it. Part 7. The crack in power didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like too many people talking at once, unsure who they were supposed to agree with anymore. Malik stayed at the booth as crew clustered in tight knots, whispers ricocheting off concrete and steel. Authority still wore Jackson's name, but certainty had slipped its grip. She disappeared into a closed office with executives in tow, the door shutting harder than necessary. Through the glass, Malik saw sharp gestures, clipped mouths. Damage control had begun. He knew the rhythm of it, the way narratives were scrubbed and repainted before they dried. That was why he hadn't left his post. The girl was guided to a chair near the wings, a blanket draped around her shoulders like an afterthought. She stared at her hands, flexing her fingers as if making sure they still belonged to her. Malik caught her eye and gave a small nod. She nodded back, grounding herself in something real. A stage manager approached him, voice low. "They're asking about you. Figures. What do I say? Say I did my job." The manager hesitated. "And before that?" Malik met his gaze. "There was a before?" The man exhaled, a sound halfway between a laugh and relief, then moved on. Minutes stretched, cameras hovered, hungry. Jackson's voice rose faintly behind the glass, then cut off. When the door finally opened, an executive stepped out, smoothing his jacket, eyes darting. He looked at Malik like he was seeing him for the first time, and didn't like the clarity. "We need to understand what happened," the executive said carefully. "It's recorded." "We mean, you." Malik leaned back slightly, resting his hands on the edge of the console. "I adjusted for stability. That's vague. So was the challenge." The executive's jaw tightened. "Ms. Vale feels undermined." Malik didn't respond. "She feels," the man continued, "that protocol was breached." "Protocol protects sound," Malik said. "Not egos." A beat. The executive glanced toward the girl, then away. "You realize this puts us in a difficult position." Malik thought of dinner schedules, homework checks, mornings built on routine. "I live there." The executive left without another word. Jackson emerged moments later, face set, eyes bright with something sharper than anger. She walked straight toward the booth, stopping just short of invading his space. "You enjoyed this," she said softly. "No. You liked watching me fail." "I watched her succeed," she scoffed. "You think that makes you noble?" "I think it makes me honest." Her laugh was brittle. "Honesty is a luxury." "Not for her." Jackson followed his gaze to the girl, who sat taller now, watching them openly. For the first time, uncertainty crept into the singer's posture. Not fear, calculation meeting resistance. "This isn't over," Jackson said. "I know." She turned away sharply, heels striking hard, reclaiming motion if not control. Malik released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Around him, the hall began to empty. People leaving with stories half-formed, ready to be shaped by whoever spoke loudest first. He packed up slowly, deliberately. Each movement was a choice not to rush, not to react. When he finished, He unplugged the old console last, fingers lingering on the worn edge. The symbolic weight of it steadied him. He powered it down and covered it, like tucking something valuable away. The girl approached, tentative. They said I should wait. For what? She shrugged. An answer. He nodded. Waiting's okay, just don't shrink while you do. She smiled faintly, the first real one he'd seen. Thank you. He shook his head. You did the work. But I kept the room fair. She seemed to consider that, then nodded, accepting it on his terms. An assistant called her name, and she was pulled back into the maze of corridors. Promise tugged in different directions. Malik slung his bag over his shoulder and headed for the exit. Halfway there, a voice called out. The junior assistant jogged up, eyes wide. I looked you up, he blurted. Malik stopped. You shouldn't. I couldn't help it. There were articles, old ones. The kid swallowed. You taught people. Malik held his gaze. People teach people. Why are you here? Because my daughter needed me. The assistant nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. They're not going to bury this, he said. Too many saw it. Truth doesn't need help, Malik replied. It just needs time. Outside, the night air was cool, washing sound from his ears. He stood for a moment, listening to the city settle. Somewhere inside, Jackson was still fighting to bend the story. Somewhere else, the girl waited, unknowingly standing at the edge of a different life. Malik walked home, steps steady. The victory wasn't finished. It was preparing. Part 8. Preparation didn't look like speeches or strategy sessions. It looked like Malik returning to the hall before dawn, keys cold in his palm, the building still half asleep. He liked it this way, when power hadn't arrived yet, and the space belonged to whoever respected it enough to listen. He unlocked the booth and set his bag down, pulling out the external drive and a folded notebook with frayed edges. The notebook had followed him through other rooms, other lives. He hadn't opened it in years. Today, he did, not for nostalgia, for alignment. Footsteps echoed softly. The junior assistant appeared, yawning. They moved the meeting, he said. Executives, media, this afternoon. Malik nodded. Good. Good? The kid repeated. Means they're nervous. He powered up the system slowly, checking each channel, each redundancy. He wasn't preparing to attack. He was preparing to withstand pressure. That had always been the difference. Word spread quietly through the crew. People lingered longer than necessary, asking small questions that weren't really about sound. Malik answered only what was needed. Trust built sideways, not head-on. Mid-morning, the girl arrived with a handler, eyes alert now, no longer searching for permission. She didn't come to the booth. She stood where he could see her and waited. He nodded once. She smiled and went back to warming up. No words required. Jackson hadn't arrived yet, but her presence was already felt. Emails buzzed. Instructions shifted. Someone tried to revoke access to the old console. Malik pointed to maintenance logs, and the request had evaporated. Paper trails mattered when egos collided. An executive finally approached him, expression neutral. We want clarity, she said. Today needs to be clean. It will be, Malik replied, and cooperative. He met her eyes. Truth cooperates. She studied him, then exhaled. You're not afraid. I'm careful. She left without pressing further. Malik took a moment alone and thought of his daughter walking to school, backpack bouncing, unaware of boardrooms or battles. He pulled his phone out, checking for messages. None. Good. He needed his focus undivided. He began setting markers in the system, timestamps that would align performance, room response, and vocal output. It was meticulous work, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look, and that invisibility had always been his advantage. If you're still here watching this unfold, subscribe and stay with me, because preparation like this is where quiet people change outcomes. By noon, the hall buzzed, cameras were set, chairs aligned. Jackson swept in late, sunglasses on, confidence worn like armor. She didn't look at Malik, but he felt her attention all the same, circling. The meeting began with statements about artistry and growth. Malik stayed silent, letting them talk around the truth. When it was time, he connected the drive, projecting waveforms onto the screen behind the stage. The room stilled. "These are last night's recordings," he said, unaltered. Someone shifted. Jackson crossed her arms. He didn't accuse. He didn't editorialize. He played the files in sequence, letting sound speak. And the difference was unmistakable. The girl's consistency, Jackson's strain, the room's response. Whispers started again, sharper now. Malik highlighted timestamps, correlations. Same room, same settings, same conditions. An executive cleared her throat. "Can this be replicated?" "Yes," Malik said, "if the voice can." Jackson laughed once, tight. "This is technical theater. It's documentation. By you. By the room." The girl stood when invited, voice steady as she explained how it felt, what she listened for. Not coached, not dramatic, honest. Malik watched the room shift toward her, gravity recalibrating. Jackson tried once more, voice rising in protest. Malik didn't engage. He let the evidence hold. That was the preparation paying off, not brilliance but patience. When the meeting adjourned, nothing was declared, no verdict announced, but lines had moved. Decisions would follow, slow and official. As people filed out, an executive paused beside Malik. "You knew this would happen," she said. "I hoped," he replied. "I prepared." She nodded once, respectful now, and left. Malik powered down the system, careful as always. The girl caught his eye from across the hall and gave a small thumbs up, a smile real this time. He returned it, then packed his bag. Outside, daylight had shifted. The city sounded different. Preparation was done. The rest would be public. Part 9. Public didn't arrive all at once. It crept in through notifications, leaked clips, clipped headlines that asked questions without answering them. Malik felt it in the way the hall buzzed before doors even opened, the way security doubled without explanation, the way eyes followed him now, not dismissive, but measuring. He took his place behind the booth like always. Same posture, same calm. The difference was weight. Everyone knew something was coming. No one was sure who it would land on. The girl stood center stage for sound check, not alone this time. Technicians hovered, respectful, almost careful. She nodded at Malik when she saw him, grounding herself. He returned it, small and steady. The room was ready. More importantly, it was fair. Jackson arrived last, flanked by publicists instead of assistants. Her confidence was back, reshaped, sharper. This wasn't the private irritation of yesterday. This was performance control. Malik recognized it instantly. She took the mic, smiling for cameras. "We're here to celebrate talent," she said, voice warm, "and to clear confusion." Confusion was another word that pretended neutrality. The audience filled quickly. Industry figures, press, a few fans who'd won access through giveaways. The lights felt hotter. Malik adjusted nothing. The system held. Jackson gestured to the girl. "Show us again," she said, "the moment everyone's talking about." The girl inhaled, slow and deep. the way Malik had shown her without ever naming it as instruction. She began. The sound bloomed clean, filling the space with something undeniable. Malik watched the waveforms trace truth across the screen, each peak exactly where it should be. No strain, no trick, just control meeting courage. Applause broke out, immediate and unrestrained this time. Jackson waited it out, smiling thinly. "And now," she said smoothly, "context." She launched into an explanation about acoustics, about how young voices sometimes benefited from unusual conditions. She framed the girl's performance as a fortunate anomaly, a spark without structure. The words were careful, polite, dismissive. Malik felt the room tilt, uncertainty creeping back in. Then a reporter raised a hand. "If it's conditions," she asked, "why couldn't you reproduce it? Same room, same setup." A ripple followed. Jackson's smile tightened. "Different voices," she repeated. "Different years of training." "Exactly," the reporter said. "Training." All eyes shifted. Malik didn't move until an executive nodded at him, permission given without being spoken. He stepped to the edge of the booth, voice carrying without effort. "Training matters," he said, "but listening matters more." Jackson shot him a warning look. He met it evenly. He gestured to the screen. "These readings show consistency across multiple takes. That isn't luck, that's control." Jackson laughed softly. "By your measurement. By physics." A murmur spread. Malik continued, careful, precise. He explained resonance, breath placement, how some voices learned instinctively what others forced. He never elevated the girl by diminishing Jackson. He let contrast do the work. "Then show it again," someone called, "side by side." The suggestion hung there, heavy. Jackson hesitated. Camera zoomed. The trap wasn't his, but it was real. She stepped forward anyway. Pride wouldn't allow retreat. They sang in sequence. The girl first, then Jackson. The difference was immediate. Not in beauty, both were strong, but in ease. One voice moved, the other pushed. Malik adjusted nothing. He let the room speak. Silence followed, stunned and absolute, and Jackson lowered her mic slowly. For the first time, she didn't smile. The crowd shifted, energy recalibrating. Respect moved toward the girl like gravity. Malik saved the final recording. He didn't need to look, he knew. Questions erupted, contracts, mentorships. What would happen next? Jackson answered some, deflected others. She was still powerful, still protected. But something essential had slipped. The girl stood taller now, eyes clear. She looked at Malik once, gratitude unspoken but solid. As the event wound down, an executive approached Malik quietly. "We'd like to talk," she said. "About your background." Malik nodded. "I figured." Jackson passed him on the way out, pausing just long enough to speak. "You waited a long time," she said. "I wasn't waiting," he replied. "I was raising my kid." Something in her expression softened, just a fraction before it hardened again. She walked on. The hall emptied slowly, buzzing with recalibrated truth. Malik packed up as he always did, unhurried. The victory wasn't about applause. It was about permanence. Outside, night settled cool and quiet. Malik breathed it in, feeling the shift settle into place. Tomorrow, consequences would arrive. Tonight, the room had chosen who it listened to. Part 10. Consequences arrived faster than Malik expected, not with shouting, but with emails marked urgent and unfamiliar faces waiting by the stage door. He arrived early again, habit steadying him, and found the hall already awake, buzzing with a different pitch. This wasn't anticipation anymore, it was recalibration. Executives occupied the front rows, tablets glowing. Legal teams lingered at the edges, quiet and watchful. The girl sat with a representative now, posture composed, hands still. She wasn't shrinking anymore. Malik noticed that first. Jackson entered without ceremony, sunglasses off, expression controlled. The armor had changed. Less spectacle, more precision. She took a seat instead of the stage. That alone told him how much had shifted. The meeting opened with statements about standards, responsibility, public perception. Malik listened, letting the words pass through without snagging. He'd learned long ago that truth didn't need to interrupt. It only needed space. When it came time for evidence, he connected the drive again. Same files, same order, consistency mattered. He narrated sparingly, pointing out timestamps, correlations, nothing more. The room leaned in despite itself. A lawyer asked questions designed to blur edges. Malik answered cleanly. Another tried to suggest manipulation. He redirected to raw data. Each attempt slid off, not because he was aggressive, but because he refused to overreach. Jackson watched silently, jaw set. When invited to speak, she stood slowly, smoothing her jacket. "I never intended harm," she said. "Pressure is part of excellence." Malik met her gaze. "Pressure without support breaks things." "That's your opinion?" "It's measurable." A pause. The room waited. An executive cleared her throat. "Miss Vale, were you aware you couldn't replicate the performance under identical conditions?" Jackson hesitated. Just a beat. "I didn't consider it relevant." "That hesitation," the executive said gently, "is relevant." The girl was asked to speak. She did, voice steady, describing what it felt like to be isolated, to be watched for failure instead of supported toward success. She didn't accuse, she explained. The effect was stronger. Malik watched faces change, some subtly, some not. People recognized themselves in systems even when names weren't spoken. When discussion ended, decisions were deferred, but direction was clear. Mentorship programs were proposed, oversight committees mentioned. Jackson's role shifted, framed as evolution. Consequences wrapped in politeness. As the room emptied, Jackson approached Malik directly. "No cameras now, no audience." "You could have ended me," she said quietly. "I didn't come to end anyone." "You exposed me." "I exposed conditions." She studied him, searching for triumph, finding none. "You gave up everything once," she said, "didn't you?" Malik didn't deny it. "I chose something else." "For her," Jackson said, eye glancing toward the girl. "For my daughter," he replied, "and for anyone who needed a fair room." She nodded once, slow. I forgot what that sounded like. He considered that, then said, "You can remember." Jackson looked away first. Later, an executive asked Malik into a side office. "We'd like to formalize your role," she said, "consulting, oversight." He shook his head. "I'll help where I am." She frowned. "You have leverage." "I have limits." She smiled, understanding now. "Then we'll meet you there." He left the hall just before dusk, the air cooler, the city louder. His phone buzzed with a message from home. A photo of a completed science project, taped and triumphant. He smiled, replying with praise and a reminder about dinner. Behind him, the hall continued reshaping itself, decisions rippling outward, and the girl exited with new confidence, surrounded by possibility. Jackson remained powerful, but altered, forced to hear echoes she'd long ignored. Malik walked to the bus stop, bag slung over his shoulder, steps unhurried. The victory hadn't been loud, it had been structural, the kind that lasted. When the bus arrived, he boarded like any other night, invisible again to most eyes. But the sound stayed changed, and so did the room. Part 11. The room didn't return to normal after that. It couldn't. Malik felt it the next morning when he walked in, and no one pretended not to see him anymore. Heads nodded. Conversations paused, then resumed with a different tone, less careless. Power hadn't vanished, but it had learned caution. He sat up quietly, the way he always did, letting routine anchor him. The old console stayed covered, untouched, a reminder rather than a tool now. The system no longer needed it to tell the truth. It had learned. Midday, a notice circulated, formal, carefully worded. Jackson Vale would be stepping back from direct auditions indefinitely. Oversight committees would review practices. New mentorship pathways announced. Nothing dramatic, everything irreversible. The girl arrived later with her mother, eyes bright, posture sure. She hugged Malik without asking, quick and fierce. He froze for half a second, then returned it gently. Her mother mouthed thank you, eyes wet. He nodded once, throat tight. "I got an offer," the girl said, unable to keep the excitement contained. "A real one." "I'm not surprised." "They asked who trained me." She grinned. "I said, life. And one sound guy." He smiled, shaking his head. "Good answer." Across the hall, Jackson watched from a distance. No entourage, no cameras. Just her. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. She crossed the space slowly. "They know," she said. "About you." He waited. "They pulled records, conservatory, acoustic research, the tour you walked away from." A pause. They were shocked. They shouldn't be. "You could have led this place." "I lead where I'm needed." She studied him, then exhaled. "I built my career believing pressure made me strong." "And did it?" Another pause, longer this time. "It made me loud." He nodded. "Loud can hide things." Jackson smiled faintly, the first unguarded one he'd seen. "I owe her an apology." "Yes. And you?" "I didn't need one." She accepted that, eyes steady. "I'm learning," she said. "Late." "Learning's not late if it sticks." She nodded once, then turned away, shoulders straighter somehow, not lighter, but more honest. An executive approached Malik afterward, clipboard in hand. "We'd still like you involved," she said, officially. He considered it, then shook his head. "I'll advise when asked," quietly. She smiled. Figures. That evening, Malik left early. At home, his daughter met him at the door, project in hand, chattering about experiments and questions and why some things resonated and others didn't. He listened, really listened, hearing echoes of the hall in her curiosity. At dinner, he told her a simple version of the truth. "Someone was treated unfairly," he said. "And we fixed the room." She nodded, satisfied. "Good." Later, as she slept, Malik stood by the window, city lights blinking like distant meters. He thought about all the rooms he'd passed through, all the times he'd chosen silence over spotlight. Tonight, the choice felt complete. The world outside buzzed with commentary, praise, backlash. None of it reached him. What mattered had already settled. Tomorrow, the hall would host new voices. Some would be strong, some fragile. The difference now was that someone was listening properly. Malik turned off the light and headed to bed, knowing dignity had been restored not by dominance but by patience, and patience, he'd learned, carried farther than any note ever could. Part 12. Morning arrived quietly, the kind that didn't announce change but carried it anyway. Malik moved through his routine with practiced ease. Coffee poured, bag slung, keys checked twice. The city outside sounded the same, but he knew better now. Systems shifted slowly, but they did shift, and once they did, they rarely went back. At the hall, the air felt lighter, not celebratory, just honest. New faces mingled with old ones, conversations less guarded, laughter not quite so sharp. Malik took his place behind the booth, not because he had to, but because he chose to. Leadership, he'd learned, wasn't always about stepping forward. Sometimes it was about staying exactly where you were meant to be. The girl arrived later than usual. Confidence settled into her like muscle memory. She warmed up without fear, voice steady, eyes clear. When she finished, the room responded naturally. No manipulation, no spectacle. Just sound meeting space. Malik watched, satisfied, not proud in the loud way people expected, but grounded in something deeper. Jackson didn't appear that day. Word traveled softly that she'd taken time away, not as punishment but reflection. Some framed it as loss, others as growth. Malik didn't weigh in. Transformation wasn't something you announced, it was something you practiced. During a break, the junior assistant leaned against the booth, grinning. "You broke the algorithm," he said. Malik raised an eyebrow. "They're talking about changing auditions everywhere," the kid continued. "No more isolation tests, more support, transparency." Malik nodded. "Good rooms make better sound." The assistant laughed. "You're impossible." "Consistent," Malik corrected. Later, an email pinged, an invitation for his daughter to visit the hall on a quiet afternoon. Educational, inspiring. He smiled, imagining her wide-eyed curiosity, her questions about wires and waves and why some spaces amplified truth better than others. He typed a short reply. Yes. When his shift ended, he packed up slowly, habit anchoring him. He passed the old console, still covered, and rested his hand on it briefly. Gratitude, not nostalgia. It had served its purpose. Outside, evening settled in cool and calm. Malik walked home instead of taking the bus, letting the city's rhythm match his own. He thought about the ripples already spreading. Young singers given fair chances, rooms redesigned with care, power nudged into accountability rather than spectacle. At home, his daughter met him with a grin. "Guess what?" she said. "My teacher wants us to write about someone who stood up for someone else." He smiled. "Sounds like a good assignment." "Can I write about you?" He considered it, and then shook his head gently. "Write about the girl." She frowned. "But you helped." "I helped make space," he said. She filled it. She thought about that, then nodded. "Okay, but I'll mention you fixed the room." He laughed softly. "Deal." That night, after homework and dishes, Malik sat alone for a moment, the house quiet. He replayed nothing. He didn't need to. The story had moved beyond him now, into other rooms, other lives. That was the point. Power still existed. It always would. But dignity had been restored where it mattered, publicly, permanently, not by humiliation reversed, but by fairness enforced, not by shouting louder, but by listening longer. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask you something. What should the next story be about? Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Say it again. Single dad replied in perfect Japanese. The silent CEO went pale. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next? Malik turned off the light and headed to bed, knowing tomorrow would look ordinary to most people, and knowing that was the clearest sign of victory there was.